Hello everyone and welcome back to The Interview. I'm your host, Susan Lee Macdonald. Thank you for joining me here at the 2012 Gwangju Biennale. This is a fantastic event that is held every 2 years, bringing in the best artists from all over the world. We're about to meet two very special people for The Interview today. I can't wait for you to meet them. Come and join me. The Gwangju Biennale is a festival of modern art. This year, with the theme Roundtable, the Biennale features 6 different styles produced by 6 different artistic directors. Roundtable includes 43 new commissions and 15 resident works, including many process-based installations and performance works. In total, there are roughly 300 pieces created by 92 artists and teams from 40 countries around the world. This year's Biennale strengthened the residency program, which invites artists to live in Gwangju and collaborate on projects with local artists, students, and local residents. The Gwangju Biennale is a fantastic festival, combining creative and experimental modern art with the democratic spirit and traditions of Gwangju. Don't miss the 9th Gwangju Biennale Roundtable, which promises to be a unique celebration of diversity and imagination. Michael Joo, winner of the grand prize at the 2006 Gwangju Biennale. Michael Joo is a second-generation Korean-American artist from New York. He surprised visitors to the 1993 Venice Biennale and gained international fame when he was invited to exhibit with Damien Hirst in 1994. In 2001, he represented Korea alongside artist Seo Do-ho at the Venice Biennale. His work deals with themes stretching from issues of mixed identity as a Korean American to more comprehensive themes like the relationship between mankind and nature. Michael Joo's installation Indivisible, a representation of democratization movements all over the world, is his contribution to this year's Gwangju Biennale. Hear him speak about his ideas about art, beauty, and the world with me, Susan Macdonald, on this week's The Interview. Michael, I'd really like to welcome you to The Interview. Thank you so much for being part of our show today.
Pleasure. Thanks.
You know, it's my first time here for the Gwangju Biennale, and I know that you are a veteran of the Gwangju Biennale. Tell me a little bit about when you first came to Gwangju for your first exhibition here.
This is my 3rd time here, wow. And I believe I was here in '95, the first Biennale, which is a very eye-opening experience. I'd never spent this much time launching such a large exhibition in a South Korean city.
And was the exhibition here in this particular hall too?
Yes, it was in this hall, but it's changed quite a bit. And I look around, and again, I see the scale of the place is much different. And I think it's architecture changes with every show a little bit. So.
I would love for you to introduce me to Indivisible, this incredible piece of art that's actually very massive, and it seems like there are lots of things for us to be able to kind of explore. Would you mind showing me and giving me a little tour?
No, let's take a look around.
Okay, awesome. So Michael, give me a tour through your artwork.
Sure. I'll give you the all-access view that I don't think the viewers will get during the exhibition. So let me walk into the piece a little bit so we can get the sense of pressure that I hope you feel and presence of those shields over your head.
Yes.
Up top we have the polycarbonate riot shields that are, I think, the most common universal shield used throughout the world, and kind of ubiquitous in a lot of the press and imagery. They're a bit of a shadowy figure, a shadowy symbol in some ways, and in many ways a conflict. And I'm interested as a transparent border that not only protects an individual, but protects a collective that can be oppressive as much as it's designed to protect. Wow. In this case, it forms a house, almost a Korean house of sorts, that's you know, inextricably tied and connected to its constituent parts. You know, even if we have this large collective overhead that protects and shields, it's also kind of threatening.
Yes.
As a collective of of individuals that's kind of faceless. I think that, you know.
I see lots of familiar objects like these cameras and film rolls, and a lot of kind of maybe personal objects here too.
Yeah, there are objects here that relate to the individual in some way to me. I mean, I know that's a very general term, and it's a bit coded, but in many ways, objects we might see involve tools of communication or hearing, for instance, speech like a bullhorn or a telephone, objects in which individuals might reach out to a larger group.
You know, my eye is drawn to this big piece over here. It looks like a series of pipes or something. What is that?
Yeah, as much as some of these objects range from personal items of my past as well as objects from Gwangju and my memories of growing up in a very traditional Korean household during the 1980 civilian uprising, I think, or Democratization Movement inception. Some of the objects also have a real specificity that addresses the nature of this material I'm using more directly. That artifact is actually a kind of hot dipped, kind of oil clay covered backpack holster from that a riot control unit or water spraying unit from the Iraq War.
Wow, so that's a riot control unit that people put in the backpacks?
They would wear it and hold tanks of either paint or water, typically, that would be used to kind of control crowds. And we also have USB recording record players turned upside down, or wallets of mine from the past.
Any money still in there?
I don't think so, but whatever I have in there is entombed forever, I think.
So why is this called Indivisible?
All the sculptures themselves, which are made in oil clay, a non-drying clay that effectively you could ball up and create something new out of, are suspended from the shields themselves. So these objects would not be able to have their position or existence without the shields.
I see.
And I think that, as the title implies, although they're very different, the group of collective individuals versus the group of more anonymous collectivity, the picture of that, almost of the state, if you will. Though they're so seemingly so in opposition, they're also somewhat inextricably linked, and in, I think, contemporary Korea that might be seen as the case.
Yeah. This is really fascinating. Yeah, I don't think I've ever really walked through a piece of art before, so this is a definite interview first. We are interviewing.
I hope you don't get trapped right inside my head.
I don't want to hurt anything here.
Okay.
And thank you for showing me. This has been really fascinating. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Please have a seat. How long did it take you to build Indivisible and to come up with the idea, the genesis for the idea?
A lot of works of this nature that are fairly involved and incorporate the space or some kind of strategy for exhibition on a site that has meaning for me often develop over a long period of time. Occasionally they're very quick and short, and the ideas that you begin to develop that you think are so great go by the wayside in favor of something that's so much more inspiring that comes as a byproduct. In this case, I've been working with these forms and some of this kind of, I guess, portable architecture almost, these shields, thinking about them for a long time. And I'd say from start to finish, beginning this Gwangju project, we spent a good half a year just developing how we were going to show it.
Now, from what I remember in my research about you and this project, you were inspired by the May 18th Democratization Movement. I know that you lived in the States and you were born and bred in the States. So how did you become familiar with that movement, and how did that kind of lead an impression for you to make this?
Well, I remember from back in the States when the civilian uprising and the kind of difficulties of that period hit the press and the world news, because it was something I believe that was only played in the international press. From our position in the States, my father and mother were fairly aware of what was going on, keeping quite close ties to Korea. So I was introduced to it really by them. And for that reason, my first project in Gwangju in '95 actually involved my father, and the beginning of what I think is this is the third part of perhaps a conversation we have with that time period and with the city in particular.
What do you anticipate are some of the reactions from Gwangju residents who see your artwork?
Well, I hope that, I'm not sure what the reactions will be. I think, I like with all of these works that involve sensitive topics in which I may or may not have had direct involvement that's obvious. I want to maintain a sensitivity and to the subject matter and to the kind of people that might be involved. At the same time as an artwork, you really want to pursue your own kind of vision and what you might or might not have to say about something. So I try to create enough of a form that's generous and has a presence that can be felt as much as thought about. And in this case, using a familiar construction technique, I thought might be an entrance or a way of introducing this difficult kind of material with such a heavy symbolic significance. So I utilized the traditional method of constructing roof, traditional Korean house roof with tiles to create the form that suspends all of these objects.
Before knowing that these are all shields, if someone were just to come and take a look, they may not really even notice that these are shields. They might think, oh, this looks like a Korean roof.
I think I've gotten some of that already.
Until they come and see how large it is, and then they see that these are shields that are somewhat familiar to them. Especially when people are probably over the age of 30, 35, they've seen different demonstrations over the years, and they've seen these kind of painted, and it has a very different meaning. Yes.
Yeah, I like them something clear. They're almost a drawing or a kind of really familiar icon in the world press right now.
I understand that you were a scientist before you started actively working as an artist. Is that correct, or have you always been an artist, but you were a scientist because you were forced to study, as many Koreans or Korean Americans tend to be kind of pushed in the science track?
I think that's all pretty accurate. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't call myself such a scientist, although I did take a job after leaving studies in biology, and with an intention to study neurobiology further down in master's work. But I had left science studies in the 80s from the East Coast and went to work with a science company in Austria for a while.
That must have been a culture shock to be in Austria. It's quite different from the States.
It was, and going from the Midwest, where I was growing up, Minnesota and Iowa, it was quite a shock, but it was also incredibly liberating. I saw and experienced there.
Oh, so what was it like when you first went to Austria? That was for your first job as a scientist, yes? Yeah,
I was in Austria, having gotten a little bit tired and disillusioned with science studies that I was pursuing. Mostly neurobiology and such, and wanted to take a break, and an opportunity came up to work with a company in Austria, based in Vienna, and at the time I had never seen kind of culture and life so incredibly intertwined and integrated. I lived with a bunch of crazy biologists that had a huge, enormous cacti environment in the basement, and did a lot of work with genetics and research, but they would rather talk about Egon Schiele and other kinds of Viennese artists than biology, and it was quite an interesting time.
Was that kind of a risk for you to switch your direction and focus work-wise? Because I'm sure that you studied hard in school. Your parents probably had certain expectations of you, being a good Korean American boy.
Certainly had expectations, I think, and I respected those expectations. But I wasn't really a great student, to tell you the truth. And you know, was very interested in the subject matter we're pursuing, but you know, really craved some application and a little deeper digging into the questions that will always seem to be coming up around these studies. And yes, I don't know if it was a risk, but I certainly was nervous changing, having grown up in a household full of scientists and with that kind of level of expectation that you're familiar with as from a Korean household in a way.
One of the things that I'd really like to ask you is for the 2006 Gwangju Biennale, you had a very interesting piece, and that was called the Body Offuscatus. Can you tell me a little bit about what that piece is about?
That piece was originally commissioned by the Asia Society in New York, and they had given me a great opportunity to go through their collection, the Rockefeller collection of East Asian art, and I didn't know at all at the time whether I would be inspired, which was kind of all that they asked, was that I take a look through the collections, rather extensive and very eclectic, and see if there was anything that would inspire any questions or response via, you know, my voice and my take on it through contemporary practice, art practice. And, you know, I was really struck by how tactile and how actually moving it was to have a first-hand and intimate experience with these things alone, you know, out of an institutional setting. So when I came across this very Western Gandharan Buddha from the 3rd century BC, I decided that perhaps a work in which we got closer to one of these objects might be something worth pursuing.
It's a really unusual thing to think about a very modern, kind of cutting-edge video camera kind of next to a very old, as in Korea they call it the Pangasa Yusang, the bronze Maitreya Bodhisattva half-sitting thinking statue. How did you come up with the idea to kind of combine those two seemingly very different elements?
The first piece that I'd worked on was very much a Buddha of the past, and the Maitreya Buddha is a Buddha, I guess, known as the Buddha of the future in a way. And so coming to Gwangju, I wanted to continue this activity that involved a really local fabric of life. So I asked a monk through communications with my curator at the time, the head monk of a local very important temple, if we could borrow a Buddha. So he actually gave us permission to borrow one of the temple Buddhas. It was actually on a mountainside.
That's such a special thing.
It was very special. We were very lucky to have that access. So we took it off the mountain where it's normally held in a place of worship and put it into the Biennale hall and surrounded its head with a camera helmet or a halo of sorts that was comprised of 50 live feed cameras that would break up the image of every square inch of the sculpture's face and replay it across a kind of endless field of monitors and hundreds of mirrors.
Why so many cameras and why so many different perspectives?
I wanted the idea of the Buddha's image, and in this case something we think is so ubiquitous and familiar, to have to go through another chain of recognition, so that it's something that where its image, which we're normally so familiar with, but at once far from as well, could be broken up into space through the mirrors and monitors and reincorporated with our own image in some way, and then we would become a part of that.
Did the Buddha go back safely to the temple afterwards?
Yes, it did. As far as I know. I think it's happily there, and I should probably go visit it.
Michael, I'd also like to ask you about your Mongoloid version B29 project. It's very eye-catching, and if you could tell me about how you decided to do that project.
At the time, I think that was back in the late 80s, early 90s, I was very interested in collecting historical artifacts. At the time I was collecting a lot of airplane parts of American planes, for instance, that flew over Korea or over North Korea during the Korean War. And so that collection kind of, one thing led to another, and my interest in the image at the time, or just kind of skepticism about the image at the time, led me to want to paint these portraits of myself. And I had very long hair at the time, and so I posed as these women.
Nude.
And posed nude as the women that they would paint to give these American bombers identity. So there was a play. I would base my poses more upon Manet and classical paintings, but apply them to these sides of the sections of fuselage from these Korean, from these American cargo and warplanes.
Wow. And where did you have that displayed?
That was displayed at a number of places, from MIT West Museum to Palm Beach in New York, and a number of other institutions and galleries.
What did people ask you most about when they saw your likeness on the side of the fuselage?
I think it took people a while to get that it was my image, which I'm kind of surprised about, given the kind of rather unalluringness of the photos, if you will, but of the paintings rather that were from photos. The work itself is really about titling and maybe mistaken identities, and the series title itself, Miss Me Gook, as well as Mongoloid, are meant to be, I guess, plays upon the idea of those racial slurs or kind of derogatory terms for Asians. Miss Me Gook happened to actually be
meaning America.
Exactly. Yeah. Happened to be a plane that actually flew over Korea during the Korean War. And Miss Me Gook was the plane, and I think it was obviously named that, aimed at the North Koreans. Miss Me Gook, meaning miss this plane. And unbeknownst maybe to the author was the artist that drew that image. As you said, Me Gook meant America, so it's literally Miss America.
Yeah. I'd like to know more about your video, the Salt Transfer Cycle. Tell me about that. It sounds like it's a very scientifically based video.
Yeah, I think the video itself is quite unscientific in a way, but the title is meant to convey some of that awkwardness, trying to capture something that you can't capture. In this case, I was sitting in the studio in New York, in Chinatown at the time, and I had always been interested in how an idea goes from the studio and gets into the world. Was there a way to make these ideas that are sometimes might be considered indulgent or and disconnected from the real world? How do we make them actually touch reality? And so that piece began in Chinatown by swimming through 2,000 pounds of MSG that I had shipped in and made a lake of in this artificial environment. And I used the MSG as a kind of substitute for salt, and thought, well, what would the next phase of this character going from west to east by going west rather than east, where would they go next? And I then went to saw the Great Salt Desert in Utah, and found the track using GPS and such, where they would race the record cars back in the 70s. And these record cars would shoot these very linear kind of puffs of energy to try to break records that had to be reset over and over again. So I thought there were these elements of cyclical and linear motifs going on like this project. So the next stage was to go from this artificial environment of the studio to a very real environment. So I did a parody of evolution on the Salt Desert, and finally my character ends up in the mountains in Gangwon-do province here in South Korea. And using remote cameras, I waited with salt on my body for 10 days for the elk that inhabit the region to come and lick the salt off my body.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yes, in my mind, transferring that idea that started in the studio of the MSG to salt, all as a stand-in for all this energy, into the bloodstreams of these animals.
And did they come and lick the salt off of you?
Yeah, much to my surprise. After 9 days, they came and did lick the salt off my body. I had been battling red ants the whole time, who happened to also like whatever was holding the salt on my body, and had no idea that when the elk actually licked my body, that the feeling of it gigantic tongue on your body might be so ticklish that you ruin half the footage.
Were you laughing the whole time?
I was laughing. I was a bit delirious after 10 days as well. Pretty limited food and water.
And were you there alone, or did you have someone there to help film?
I had someone who would check in every day and who would help operate cameras, but I also had remote cameras from my position, and someone had to change the reels. So we shot a lot of it. Very now old-fashioned high-8 video camera, video tape.
Yes. I imagine you still have that footage, though, yes?
I still have a lot of outtakes that are pretty fun to watch.
Maybe we could see a couple of them.
Okay.
Michael, what are some of your future plans?
In the immediate present, I'm planning for a large project with Inuit whaling community up in Barrow, Alaska, which is pretty at the moment in the works, so I won't speak too much in depth about, but it does involve federal fish and wildlife and the language of the law, as well as a project that I'm beginning research on at the Smithsonian, and that involves a fossil field in Morocco, and basically trying to talk about real estate and repatriation of land via this kind of area that's unified by the fact that it has a diminishing bed of 500 million-year-old fossil plants.
And the Smithsonian project is going to basically bring you to the DC area, but you'll also have the project in Alaska, but the Smithsonian project also deals with Morocco, you said?
The Smithsonian involvement is largely research-based. I've been given an opportunity to do residency with their digital imaging departments and seeing what the idea of traveling to images, digital imaging, and then digital printing, three-dimensional printing can say about visual culture and time and how we look at objects and things. So the project involving the Smithsonian is kind of immaterial, but I think it goes hand in hand with the project that I'm working on in Morocco and have been for several years now.
If you were able to comment on what you've seen with a lot of up-and-coming Korean American and Korean artists who have been starting out in this business, so to speak, and in this creative field, what type of advice would you give them?
That's tricky. Probably be careful considering too quickly entering into this as a field or as a business, because I don't think it really is. I think it's an extension in a way of interests, and maybe even an extension of one's own life or practice that they're pursuing at the time. But I think it's something where young artists should just know that they need to be very doubly aware of their, I guess, kind of identity and presence in attempting to work through a dialogue of contemporary art that's based in Western art, and to find their place in it would be to really examine deeply or fully acknowledge, just what their take or position is, and what their own experiences are, and what they could bring to that dialogue.
Would it be safe to say, and I don't mean to be condensing it too much, but would it be safe to say that the artist needs to know him or herself well enough to know how to make art, or how to be part of the business of art?
In a way, I think it's ongoing. I don't think you can actually. I think it's a continual process, and perhaps the making of a continuation of an art process is a practice. It's about finding some of that out.
Michael, it has been such a pleasure to have you here on the interview, and I feel like I wish I had more time to kind of go over just more about your philosophy and more about your take on the Korean scene, but hopefully we'll be able to have you back another time. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too.
I think that's a very tough question, but I would definitely choose the same pathway. I don't know where I'd end up. There's so many variables, but I think I would definitely choose the same type of work and the same method of getting here. There's been a lot of roads, and there have been a lot of encounters and places and things that I've seen and been able to see through this practice that I can't imagine would be recreatable any other way. But I suppose that's the same for every individual.
Kimsooja, Korea's Bottari artist. She has become one of the world's most renowned artists with her work using needle, thread, and cloth since the 1980s. Her work spanned from sewn work to installations and performance art, and in the 1990s, she became a media artist. Her video Cities on the Move, 2727 kilometers, Bottari Truck Korea, was featured in the Venice Biennale and placed her name squarely in the international spotlight. Kimsooja has moved beyond the limits of traditional Western art that uses canvas, paint, and brushes to create her own expressive art world. Meet her art and philosophy on this week's The Interview.
First of all, I would like to thank you so much for being a part of our show here on The Interview.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. May I just call you Kimsooja? Is that how you prefer to be called?
Yes.
Great. It's just one name altogether. Great. You know, Susan in Korean, when I spell it,
American Westerners remember my name quite easy because of Susan.
Yes.
Or Susie.
It's just missing the one like neon on the bottom because
exactly.
I spelled Soo-chan.
Yeah. Suja is like Susie or Susan in America.
What does the Su and the Cha mean in Korean?
In Korean, actually, each word has meaning. So, Su means keeping something. Like Bottari in a way, and Cha means sun, actually, and it's also a person. So maybe I was born to create the Bottari, but also interestingly, Suja in Hindi means needle.
A needle. So interesting.
That sews mattresses. It's a special needle this big.
Oh my gosh.
That, sews the mattresses. I was so shocked.
That's so interesting to know.
Yeah,
because
I heard about it when I was filming in Mumbai in 2007. Yeah.
Incredible. And that was for the laundry project.
Mumbai laundry field.
Yes. Yeah. Well, before we get into your incredible history of all of your artwork, I'd like to first ask you what brings you to the Biennale here in Gwangju?
Well, this is actually my third time in the Biennale, and it is my pleasure to be back and to show an album, Hudson Guild, which is actually dedicated to my deceased father.
Oh. I'm sorry to hear.
Yeah, but it's nice to also bring his memory back to Korea and to be able to show in Gwangju publicly.
I'd love to ask you about each experience that you've had coming to the Gwangju Biennale. This time, you're here to do the work around the Hudson Guild Senior Center. And if you could explain to me the inspiration for the work.
Actually, my father had a brain damage, so he had some memory loss, especially for short memories. So when he was still alive, we often talked together, sitting together, and then he would stand up and look around and then trying to find me. Where's Suja? I was just standing next to him. And I was so shocked to see that scene, and I was wondering what memory means in life. You know,
wow.
If someone lose all his memories he lived, what does life mean? And from that time I was pondering the issue of memory and life. And then I had a commission work from an organization in Chelsea in New York called More Art. And they proposed to work with a couple of options. One was the senior center in Chelsea called the Hudson Guild.
Yes.
So I immediately said, yes, I would like to work with them. So I met more than 20 senior senior people there and filmed them their frontal portrait and also the back, and then each time when they were sitting their back towards the camera, I was calling their names. And then they were looking back to the camera, and at a certain moment I would freeze the moment so that the moment becomes eternity.
Wow.
So each one had spontaneously and simultaneously switching their positions and the combination of persons together. And then at the end, in a theater, I let them sit in the theater seats, and then I was filming them from the stage.
All together on the stage?
All together as a kind of constellation of the, human being. So.
And all the people that you chose to be part of your project, did they all have some type of issue with memory loss, or did they all stay at the Hudson Center because of something else?
Not particularly. They had any issue of memory loss, but they were mostly immigrants from all over, from China, from India, or from Latin America, and so on. And once the camera was set and let them just be, I didn't ask anything to act or something, but just ask them, be yourself, and just stay there for a while. And then they would just start focusing, and then they would have their own, psychological journey in a sense. So I could also see their the journey to their past and present and future. So each individual shows their own kind of memory of their lives and also the time. And then all together as a group video, all those individual memories and time become a certain kind of constellation of the space. So it is kind of blinking and then disappearing, coming up and disappearing. There's also breathing sound in and out, and so then it kind of fade out, and then I put as to my father. That also means that all the calls are, to bring back my memory to my father.
So what is the message that you're trying to convey with your artwork there?
As I said, each one, I would also let them live their own moment, space and time while I was filming, so that people also can experience their own inner memories and journey to their own time and
like
past.
Like an inner view?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was like an inner viewing. Yes.
Like the name of our show.
Yeah, exactly. So I was
it's perfect that you're here.
I was quite impressed by this title, INNERviewing. Oh, that's very interesting title of the show.
Wonderful. You know, it seems that for a project of this scale, it would have taken more than a few trips to go to the senior center. And I'm just curious, how much time did it take for you to get everything that you needed and that you were satisfied with?
Well, we filmed only 2 days, but I've been there a few times to check what they are doing there and who are they, and I've been trying to talk to each one and what their background is. And it was quite interesting because each one, they are all very, you know, now they are old, but each one had an interesting life, and there were also a dancer, there were a poet, there were actors,
being in New York City, I'm sure you have
exactly.
a lot of creative people there.
Yeah, and also this project, More Art Project, is also about to bring consciousness of the neighbors who lived in Chelsea, who were kind of pushed out by the Chelsea gallery scene. You know, the gallery in a way dominated the whole area now. So the residents, residents are kind of a little bit forgotten, and they are, you know, taken out from the center location. So that was their intention, to bring, you know, the communities back to where they live.
Kimsooja's exhibition Kimsooja to Breathe is now open in the Gukje Gallery in Seoul. The exhibition features all of Kimsooja's most important works from the past 10 years. The video installation Mumbai, a laundry field, resembles an anthropological documentary. In the K2 hall, visitors can see the 3-part video Mirror of Air, Mirror of Water, and Mirror of Wind filmed in Greenland, as well as chapters 1 and 2 of Thread Routes, the first work filmed by Kimsooja on 16mm film.
이 작업은 트레드 루트라고 하고요. 제가 그 6개의 시리즈로 제작을 하고 있는 작품입니다. 바늘이 어떤 그 추상적이고 상징적인 어떤 몸이라고 한다면은 실은 어떻게 보면 어떤 우리의 마음의 어떤 그 흐름이라고 볼 수 있을 것 같아요. 그래서 이번 작업은 바늘의 어떤 디멘션과 실의 디멘션을 세퍼레이트해서 보는 하나의 또 다른 그 챕터라고 할 수 있고요.
In this piece, you can hear Kimsooja's breathing and humming.
To breathe, invisible mirror, invisible needle이라고 하고요. 제가 이 작업은 그 베니스에 있는 라 페니체 극장에서 그 의뢰받고 제작한 것인데요. 사실 제가 오랜 동안 그 의문하고 있었던 어떤 회화의 어떤 평면의 문제, 그 문제를 다시 질문하는 것이고요. 그 숨의 날숨과 들숨의 관계를 어떤 삶과 죽음의 어떤 경계의 문제를 오가는 행위로 그렇게 상정을 하고 한 작업입니다.
Visitors can also see Kimsooja's works from the early 2000s. The video Buttari, Alpha Beach, was filmed at Alpha Beach in Nigeria, which still holds the scars of the slave trade. The series and album Havana, filmed on Malcolm Beach in Cuba, is a mix of video art and landscape art, marking a return to the two-dimensional with blurred images that seem to be melting into the wind and light.
제가 작업과 연관해서 말씀을 드리자면 어떤 세계의 어떤 진실 내지는 어떤 토탈리티에 도달하는 것이라고 할 수 있겠고요. 또 그것을 통해서 제 자신과 세계를 이해하고 또한 타인을 이해하는 과정에서 제 자신을 초월하는 일, 그리고 제 자신을 완전히 소멸해서 무가 되는 그런 상황을 추구하고 있다고 생각됩니다.
What are some of your upcoming projects or future plans? I know that you've probably got a lot on your plate, as always.
I have actually Thread Roots. Still, it's one of the biggest projects I'm doing. I still have 4 more locations to finish.
Wow.
Because I've been doing in Peruvian weaving, and then lace makings in European countries, which I'm showing at the gallery. Then I filmed in India, in Kutch area, in Gujarat, for the nomadic weaving communities, weaving culture and the architectural forms. At the same time, I'm planning to do another trip to China, Sichuan and Yunnan area, and then Mali in Africa, and also Native American Indians.
Wow.
So it's a big project.
That sounds like an incredible amount of traveling too.
Yes, yes.
A lot of work.
But it's always challenging, and I'm learning a lot about the weaving culture and this world. And then another project conceived by GSA in US.
GSA?
It's a government institution for art and architecture.
Okay.
They commissioned me a video piece of the portrait, which is in a way similar to the on-album Hudson Guild.
Okay.
I'm going to film all the immigrants related to the borderline between Mexico and US at the Mariposa main entry port.
Oh, wow.
So I will install the video portraits with a LED screen right on top of the revolving door of the borderline.
Oh, wow.
So people going in and out will be, you know, facing these portraits of their facing towards the bodies that meets their frontal portrait and their back, and then returning. So it's in a way creating the borderline, not only the geographical and physical, political borderline, but also psychological borderline they have. So I'm quite excited about this project.
That's so exciting. Well, Kimsooja, I wish you the best of luck with all of the upcoming projects that you have. And thank you for taking the time out. There's actually so many more things that I know that our audience would like to know about you, and I'm sure that they can find out more about you on the web and go and visit your installations and your projects all throughout the world. So thank you again for being with me today.
Thank you so much.
I look forward to meeting you again.
Thank you.